All right, here we go. Welcome in to another edition of the Rice Football Blue and Gray Preview Show. Your host here, Matthew Bartlett, joined as always with JP Heath. I'm with the Roost. He's with the Owls. We're all ready for one more football game. We're a third of the way through the season. Can you believe this?
I can by the math, but I can't by living it. It's crazy how fast it goes. They've packed a lot of storylines in the first four games, huh?
Yeah, I was talking with somebody the other day, and you remember that season where Rice only played 5 games and we're about to play our 5th game?
Don't remind us.
It's wild times. All right. Well, as always, I'm going to let you cheat, JP. We're here to preview the game at hand, but I will allow you to put one snippet, one idea out in the ether of whatever you want from this past weekend's loss to the Houston Cougars across town. So you're one freebie to look back before I grab your head and make you look forward. What do we got?
All right, I'm going to time myself here with the new watch face. Give myself just flag me down if I go too long. You always have that permission, but I learned a lot. I learned this is a team with fight. We kind of knew that, but seeing it in that setting, hostile, noisy territory, turn that music down. I learned that things went against Rice that were out of their control. That what I thought, obviously, I call it with a colored lens. The fumble return that shouldn't have been with 3:34 left to go. Credit the U of H player for making the play, but TJ's arm was going forward. And then a near miraculous finish. Just who says baseball is the game of inches? It's football. The way that one ended, that would have been one for college football lore, much less Bayou Bucket lore. And I got the sense, again, keep social media with a grain of thought. It doesn't, sorry to spoil this on a social media thread, it doesn't really matter in the end. But the comments Dana Holgerson made after the game made you think that Houston lost the game. If nobody told you what happened in the game, you would have thought that both teams lost in that game. But it was a loss that showed some growth. It doesn't matter, as coaches told us a couple times this week already. You've got to win for that true growth. But I at least saw a lot to know that this is a much better team than we've seen the last few years. And in his best team, clearly, I think, in 5 years. I don't think I'm going off on too big of a ledge saying that.
No, I don't think you are. And I think the part about it that makes it so interesting as we transition into the game ahead is we've had kind of these, watershed moments with this team in the past, right? We had the Marshall game in 2020. We had the UAB game last year, moments where they crest and everything goes right and they win a big game, or they have that loss that's the quote unquote good loss for where they are right now. But what we've seen with this team over the past couple of years is they've had that moment and they've played, more or less perfect, really, really well. The Marshall and the UAB game, you go to those two landmark wins where it was basically the best game they've played from multiple phases to get those wins. Mm-hmm. And they've kind of regressed after that in other times. They just not played up to that standard, and losses have followed. And I think something that's really interesting this season is you saw the win against McNeese, in which you just blew somebody out of the water that you should have done. So that was good. We talked about that. But then you look at the Louisiana game and the Houston game. We now have, I feel like, 3 games in a row where Rice has put together a very good offensive performance, a very good defensive performance, and a very good special teams performance. This is one note that I actually found out. This is going on a Q&A piece for Patreon subscribers that'll be out later today. But I'm going to spoil it here if you're listening. Jack Fox's touchback percentage when he was at Rice on kickoffs was somewhere in the ballpark of about 60%. Tim Horton's kicking 63% of his kickoffs for touchbacks this year. We don't talk about kickoffs as a big deal, but there's no returns. All 3 phases, Rice is now stacked. I feel like 3 games where we feel really good about the product that they put on the field. There hasn't been we did everything right, and then it just didn't happen. And that's what I think is most interesting when you go ahead and you look at this game and we talk about UAB, because the UAB game last year, I mean, Wiley completed something like 90% of his passes after the second drive or something. Like, he was perfect. The defense had the big takeaway, and it still came down to a Hail Mary play at the end from UAB for Rice to close out and win the game. Like, Rice had to be perfect, and they barely snuck by. This is what I think is so interesting this time, is that I think, we've seen like some turnover against U of H, some unfortunate penalty calls, Louisiana 3 interceptions. We've seen Rice play well, and I said very good earlier. Maybe it's been well, but there's been room for improvement. So I don't think Rice has to play a perfect game to win, and that's something I don't think we've been able to say in a while, especially against an opponent of this quality. I'll clarify.
Yeah, the margin with respect to UAB is smaller. I know we'll get more down to the nitty gritty in a second, but you don't feel the way you did going into the last UAB game that you do in this one. I think, even though the spread's 10, I think you feel like this one in Rice, that it's been documented one of the biggest overachievers so far this year as far as expectations. And there are other Conference USA schools that are on the other end of that list. So yeah, I think. On your note about special teams with Horn, we take the touchback. I do, I'll admit. Sometimes we might take the touchbacks for granted, but he's been fantastic. And to see Christian Van Sickle one up his career high that he had already had in that game, that's something that you can't take for granted either. So
here's another fun note.
Team. Yeah.
Here's another fun note. Rice has made 5 field goals this year in 4 games. You know how many field goals they made last year in 12 games?
Around that mark, if not a
5.
Couple. Yeah.
They have already tied, and they've only missed 1, and that was from 47 yards in a game that was more or less, it wasn't quite a blowout at that point against McNeese, but it was one you didn't really have to have. You'd like it, but it wasn't do or die. The miss came from 47 yards. You'll live for that. Live with that after where Rice has been on that front. But I think we lived a little bit in the past. We're going to kind of transition forward. All of that applies to this game because I think we're talking about a Rice team that we believe is playing its best football that we've seen in quite some time. So we're going to go ahead and transition. We're going to look ahead at how Rice matches up with UAB. And I think there's one place we have to start, and it's with the defense for UAB, because this is a team that has been an elite defensive unit now since the program came back from 2017. They just keep churning out guys, and they've one of the handful of programs. I feel like they've gotten 2 or 3 guys drafted in the front 7 the past couple years, and then they'll send one out, and then they have another. They got Noah Wilder at linebacker, who leading Conference USA in tackles through 3 games, 11.3 per game. There we go. We got Bordy. They just got so many dudes. So Rice is going up against, I don't know, maybe the best defense they've played so far this year. It's close. Houston definitely had the best pass rush they'll see, but one of the better defenses they'll face this year. So what do you think? We got Bordy up here. What do you think about UAB defense? What do we need to know from this group of guys?
Well, first off, there's a lot of names that stay there. And I have this internal monologue where you can relate. And then Coach Bloomgren also, he was saying about Wilder. I have his quote here. Coach was like, hey, it seems like he's been there a decade. You have Starling Thomas. It seems like he's been there forever. Swopes, their star, kind of hybrid safety corner that has been there forever. Fish McWilliams. You see, they just rotate so many guys on the defensive line, and I would rank them below Houston, probably a distinct space there. Houston being the clear best defense that Rice has faced, and then UAB maybe even ahead of USC there, stacking pound for pound. Because you look, I don't have all my charts. Come on, it's just Wednesday, but this is their rankings, and they only give up 14 points a game. UAB, facts are facts. They don't schedule up as much as some other teams, but that's understandable because of where they were rebuilding the program from. They've got the most amazing redemptive story in college football history, I think. the way Coach Clark was able to, hallelujah, it's not Sunday, but he rose them from the dead. They were done. They were gone. Finito, muerte, nothing. And he brought them back. So that's why they don't
We got
have.
some muerte. All right.
Yeah.
Dropping the
Ellos
Spanish.
están muertos.
This
but
is
they,
an educational program.
hablo un poco español, but they're great. Going to the football, they have 6 picks on the year. That's top 10 in the country, and they have the 13th best scoring defense in the country as well. But they're good on the back end. They're great on the outside, and really good in the middle. Noah Wilder has the most tackles per game inside Conference USA. He missed one earlier in the year, but he is 6th in the nation in tackles per game. So, yeah, they can go. And it's a wrestling of the time of possession. Can the UAB defense get Rice off the field? You see the same digits I do, and we see the snaps and go to the practices. Rice wants to keep the football and play some keep away. The Owls are 3rd in the nation in time of possession, and UAB is the top 30. So these are two teams that really they don't like giving that football up. So I think if the Owls can move it, they've got to establish the ground game and do a little bit better in that fact. But that defense is very salty for Coach Vincent and company.
We talk more about time of possession now than I think I ever have in my entire life.
Yeah.
Bloom loves it. I mean, if it works, it works, right? You don't complain, and it's working this year. And I think it's interesting because, I think through week 4, I guess this is week 4, right? No, 5. Through week 5,
Cinco.
4 games in. UAB was off last week. They're throwing me off with their numbers. They've played 3 games. But I think this is the point where we kind of start figuring out, how good teams are, because there's so vast of a difference in what Rice has done in the non-conference slate and what UAB has done in the non-conference slate. So I think you kind of hold things up. They played Alabama A&M. They won 59-0. You translate that to a Rice McNeese game where you had a comfortable win. They've also played Liberty, lost to them by a touchdown on the road. And they played Georgia Southern, who is actually pretty spunky this year. If you know anything about them, they inherited some guy that used to coach at USC, and they've been throwing the ball around. So that's a pretty good offense. They held that offense to 21 points, 135-21, in large part because they can run the football a lot. So I think this is a case where, sometimes you look at a number this early and you're like, wow, they're a top 15 defense nationally. You're like, yeah, but who have they played? Well, playing an FCS team that doesn't score a touchdown, that'll help those numbers. But, I mean, Liberty, Georgia Southern, like those are 2 competent to good to quality, I think, G5 programs this year. So I think we're looking at a defense that, maybe they're not top 10 in the nation by the time we get to the end of the year. But I think given by what we've seen in years past, given by the personnel that's coming back, it's pretty jarring. And I think they're still going to be really good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you could see this defense winning a Conference USA championship. It's not like you go, oh, there's this hole here for UAB. We're still, like, for those that don't know, this is more focused on the opposition. You couldn't convince me like, oh no, they have so many holes they can't win a conference championship. And that's where they look like on all sides of the ball. And they're a great special teams unit too. So this is a team, not to steal any segues, but also it just came to mind, we can't not talk about how motivated they will be after the unexpected loss to Rice last year. I say with intended sarcasm there, that they put out in their game notes. No shade thrown.
Tell me about the last expected loss that you were part of.
Yeah, not picking nits there, because UAB folks are great people, but they're UAB. My point in all of that, saying ramping up, they're coming in ready to play. And this is the end. And again, FAU's no slouch. We'll have FAU in the due time in 2 weeks. But Matthew, are you sitting down? This is this is UAB team that is going to be as juiced and motivated, I believe, as any in that we've seen at Rice Stadium. And 2 trips ago, they blew out the Owls. But you remember the last time they came was Giovanni Johnson's last start at quarterback. That last game of the last home game of the Pandy season, I believe.
Game. Yep.
Yeah, last home game. So the Owls have played them close recently as the Owls have steadily improved. But Mama, this going to be a very energetic one too. They have not allowed any point. A defense also has shut out its opposition in those 3 games in the first quarter. While they've scored, was it 28-42? I've got it in when we go to the offensive board here in just a second. Yeah, 42-0. They've outscored their opposition. So these guys are coming in. They're salty. They're going to be ready to play, but it's about weathering that early storm. And I'd be interested to see if Rice does win the opening coin toss, if Coach goes against the grain from what he usually does. This is just me. I'm not saying he should do this. Fans know this by now. I have to feel like I have to preface this every time. I'd be curious to see if
they don't ask us for play calls, do they?
We're all sides are happy with that. We're both thankful about that. But if the Owls take it, like we saw it worked out as the Cougars were able to double up and get a 2-for-1, and that ended up being a big difference in the game when they were able to get that 10 points, the 3 before the half on Saturday and the 7, or the other way around. Anyway, they got the 10 points on the 2-for-1 drive. So I'm curious about a lot of things, but that start is going to be mammoth coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, it's interesting because Rice is largely they were not at their best in the first half against Houston, didn't get going, punted 3 straight times. Only time that's happened this season because Rice has punted 6 times in their last 3 games. So and turned the ball over, I think, too many times against USC. We remember those. So punted a lot against Houston early. Louisiana first half had those interceptions. McNeese kind of took a minute to get rolling, got some points early in that one. But this has largely been a team that hasn't clicked out of the gate, which is actually unusual compared to what we've seen from this team in years past. They've been really good on scripted drives early in the game. So hopefully that changes. I was looking at this as we kind of one last note on how the Rice offense kind of compares to the UAB defense. I'm going to just go through some names because I feel like UAB feels like they're coming back and that team that beat them last year and we're going to get them. I got a little spoiler for any Blazers listening to this. I don't think you're playing the same team. Because here are the guys that took the field. Well, I'm just saying, like, we think this team is different, but I'm just going to go through the list. Starting quarterback last year, played all the snaps, Wiley Green, not playing this weekend. Leading rusher, Ari Broussard. That's the only guy back. After that, Jager Bull, Kalen Griffin, Jordan Myers, Wiley Green. Go through the receivers. Who caught the ball against UAB last year? August Pete, Jake Bailey, Cedric Patterson, Jordan Myers, Jager Bull. Nobody else. Mm-hmm. All right. You go leading tacklers. You got Gabe Taylor and Josh Piercy. Yeah. Desmond Baker, Miles McCord, Naeem Smith, Antonio Montero, Cole Garcia with 2, Play Wyatt with 2. You got a handful of those guys that are back on the field, but just from a personnel standpoint, this is a completely different team that showed up on the field last year, at least on the offense perspective for sure, because none of those guys are going to be there catching passes. You got a different quarterback. Ari is still back at running back, but he was the one that was productive last year and kind of salted out drives at the end of the game. So it's going to be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, my brother, that is why we do this. And no coincidence that we have. It's scary for one of us that we're thinking alike there, because I was just thinking that, you know what? There's really not anything similar to what happened last year at all. It starts with number 7. The way TJ and Wiley was obviously wonderful in that game, but the way TJ has commanded this team, and it just sucks the way it had to happen with such a great human being and representation of Rice football, Wiley Green, going down. But this is a bigger punch offensive team that we'll see this year with number 7 back there at quarterback. And the way he just had guys in his lap against some mean dudes, mean football dudes from the Cougars. And Saturday night at about 6, depending on who wins the opening coin toss, between 6:32 and 6:42, there's going to be some mean dudes in his lap again. So I think the biggest of those differences has been obviously TJ McMahon, but having Rosner and McCaffrey and Esdale. We haven't talked about Esdale yet. Hopefully he's okay after that ankle tweak Saturday. Yeah, my brother, that they are a drastically different team. And conceptually, Coach Calhoun has told me, Coach Smith, defensive line coach, DC, respectively, they're doing so many things different. And because the way the secondaries played, they're covering a lot, doing a lot of things different. UAB likes to strike it deep, and I think the Rice secondary is playing the best it's been. I'm not going to say since I've been here because I called 2 NFL corners for a couple years, Bryce Callahan and Phillip Gaines, but this is a very, very good secondary that'll be matched up against the receiving core of the Blazers.
Hey, maybe it's not a coincidence that Phillip Gaines is back as an assistant, and Rice is currently producing one of their best defensive units since he was here playing. Is he any eligibility left? Maybe.
I asked him.
Probably
He said
not.
he doesn't. No, that whole 8 or 9 year NFL career, I guess.
Rules. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because as we transition now, we flip-flop to the other side of the football before we close out. The corner play has been phenomenal for Rice. With I think Jordan Dunbar kind of came into his own last year, and Sean Fresh got there, I think, towards the end of the year. And they're two guys that Rice can really put on islands and just say, hey, win. And they do with consistency against elite wide receivers. Tank Dell for Houston did have a breakaway touchdown. That was the only time this year that I can remember a receiver getting behind the Rice defense. Other players like Caleb Williams threw a couple touchdown passes, but this was really the only time we're like, oh, this dude has 10 steps and nobody's catching him. It's been a lot of Rice will give the underneath stuff to make sure that you got to earn your way down the field. That's what Brian Smith has consistently done on defense. But that touchdown that U of H scored was against the slot corner, not against either of those guys on primary coverage there. So, and this is going to be interesting with what UAB wants to do, because I think back to the 2019 game that lasted like 8 hours in the rain at Lincoln Field. You remember that one?
I
think UAB had touchdown passes in that game, 3 touchdown passes of 55 plus yards, because they just will run the football, suck you in, and then hit you over the top. And I think that's something that the touchdown passes they threw last year, there were 2 of them in that game. One of them was a bust. Another one where a guy fell down, and another one was a perfect placement throw that I don't know how you're going to defend. And that happens sometimes, but they were only able to score 2. I'm thinking actually this is the 2020 game that didn't win. So they've matched up and now really well 2 years in a row, I think, defensively with what UAB wants to do. The past 2 years were much more successful for the Owls on that front. They got the dudes this year, and UAB has lost. They had two NFL tight ends that have since left the program last year to this year. They're now, I think, a handful of either on a roster or on a practice squad, some dudes that got drafted. And they got really Trey Shropshire is the guy to watch on offense for them. I believe he missed the past game, but he's expected to be back. We got Bordy here. So they got a couple pieces, but the secondary, I'm really feeling really good with where Rice is at on that front. Who else before we get to, I guess, the running game? What do we got to know about the passing game for the Blazers? Who's up here?
I didn't plug the numbers in just yet.
Nothing.
What?
Nobody else matters.
Everything matters. It's all about the details. Yeah, Shropshire did not play last week, but he's has some Texas connection there, playing junior college up the road. But he and Rudolph are the deep threats. They don't have a lot of catches combined between them, but they're the big ones. And Ryan Davis, one of the leading receivers, TJ Jones, also there too. So, yeah, you mentioned the tight ends. They had, I think it's Damas, is how you pronounce it, in Marshall territory there. UAB nabbed them a really good replacement tight end. You mentioned Hayden Pittman, who I've ingrained. It's not Hayden Pittman. It's Terrell McDonald this year, but they've been running into 3 different tight ends. But they've got tight ends that can move too. They are tight ends. They look like they could be H-backs, but they They can move on the offensive side. So I won't look ahead because I really want to talk about the UAB running game. But yeah, their receiving core, you got to keep them in front of you. They don't have a Tank Dell, but they're still a really good, balanced receiving core. They only average 162 yards passing, but the thing they like about Hopkins is his efficiency. He was the number 8 efficient passer. I worded that weirdly last year, but he's still a guy that's not going to necessarily chuck and duck and be the gambler that TJ McMahon is. TJ's not a chuck and duck guy, obviously, but he's not just wild, bouncing all over the place and going to beat you with his arm all the way. But oh yeah, by the way, Hopkins last year had a career high 318 yards in that game against Rice. So I'm remembering back, that might have been part of the game plan for the Owls. Like, hey, Hopkins, we're going to make you beat us. Again, folks watching, I'm not saying I know any of the game plan for this year. Got to say that over and over again. But if Hopkins is forced to beat them and not these two guys here, Brown and McBride, then it could be a really close game in the fourth quarter. I would like the Owls' chances, but you can't let Brown and McBride beat you on that zone, plant that leg, as Coach was saying, and cut it back up the middle. And not to be overlooked, but the line's fantastic. The only guy that they flipped, they had Traherne that stepped in, but they had Telfort that's coming back. Reichard's a veteran for them. McGee and Wells. And you look at Rice's on the other side. Comparatively, I know this isn't necessarily Rice center now, but the Owls starters on the offensive line, they got 3 redshirt freshmen that have had some extensive playing time this year. But UAB's got a very veteran offensive line.
Well, it's looking likely at this point that Rice could start its 5th different offensive line in 5 games coming to this one.
Mm-hmm.
Like and to do what they've done on offense, given that, is mind-blowing because again, like, you just losing so many pieces up front for a unit that wants to run the football and do what they have and be able to still protect enough to get long pass plays developing down the field. It's been incredible. But talking about UAB a little bit, at least, let's go back the running game and Jermaine Brown. I think this is going to be really interesting because when I went back and I kind of rewatched some key pieces of the Houston game, and I looked at the stats, Tazon Henry actually ran for a pretty good clip against the Owls. The run defense, by the numbers, didn't look very good. Mm-hmm. When I watched the game, I felt better about it than what the numbers said. I think what was interesting is I look back and I watched some of his big runs. What he did so well is he kind of waited at the touch point and then was able to, when Rice clogged the hole and collapsed, he bounced outside and kind of took stuff off the perimeter after the line had already clogged down. I think that's something that is going to be interesting to watch against McBride because he's fast, but he's not, he probably not as a guy who's going to be bouncy and shifty. He's going to run through you. He's got power. He's got speed. The thing that makes him scary is if you give him 6 inches of daylight, he can burst through one arm and he's gone. So I think that's going to be the real interesting piece here because, again, I'm not drawing up the game plan. But if I'm looking at UAB, I'm saying, yeah, I know, right? I'm saying we have corners. We have Gabe Taylor, George Nyakwa on the back end. We got Trayshawn Chamberlain. They're not going over the top. We're putting 7, 8 guys in the box, and we're going to see if we can stop McBride or at least contain him. I think given – and this is one of the things that Rice has been really good. If you look at just pure rushing defense throughout the past couple of years, this has been a team that has been really stingy on the ground, and they've done that rotating through different pieces. Number 4 rush defense right now in Conference USA. I mean, you go back to 2020, had a top 5 run defense as well. 6th, and now I'm looking at Conference USA rankings in 2019. They have done really well at preventing you from getting yards on the ground, and they've been particularly effective when you need those yards. We got to go back to the fourth down stop that they had against Houston. I think what is teams have been able to do when they've been able to run against Rice is to do things off schedule, to do things on, a second and long, or a non-obvious running situation, or bounce something out, or a broken tackle. That's been where teams have had the most success against Rice running the football in recent years. So if they can just keep like quantity number of bodies in front of McBride, I feel pretty good. But that's going to be the challenge, the key piece. I think if we just say stop McBride, that's the answer. I think that might be enough. So it's never that simple, but it kind of feels that simple.
Yeah, it almost worries you because that is laying out there that the one big thing that UAB does so well, what was it, top 6 in the nation, running the ball. Numbers wise, right, per rush, Rice has given up almost 6 yards per rush, where their totals, they make other teams run so many plays to try to get that bulk number. It just seems that it's on a tee there. You're like, wait a second, it's never that easy. Hopkins is still a talented quarterback, and to try to assume that, oh, he can't beat you, that would be the false assumption if you're an Owls fan. Again, this is a guy that had a career high performance against you. Yeah, my big Captain Obvious again. I'm really great going in the lab figuring this one out. Stopping the combination of McBride and Brown, if you can make them work for their yards to use, like when you're going against elite guys in basketball, just they might go off for 40, they might go for 35, but don't make them make everybody else better. Like, you're going to give up a big one, but don't let that be in a 13-10 game late, or break a tie in the last minute. Just and don't be phased when they do break a long run, because McBride averages 8-9 yards per carry. Brown, no slouch, almost 5-6. As a team, they average about 5 yards per carry. So yeah, you can't give up the daggers at the wrong time. But like you just reiterated, when the Owls had to stiffen up, they did in that Cougars game, and that's very encouraging.
Yeah, this is a good football team that Rice is playing again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think going into the year, as we kind of wrap up, we kind of circled, I think this stretch of games going in, we said Louisiana, Houston, UAB, right there before the bye. I feel like you want to win at least one, to get a couple wins in before the bye. You'd like to steal two. And it's going to be a tough out. We knew this was obviously the tougher portion of the schedule. You got a couple big non-conference games, and then you got UAB, who's been the heavyweight in this conference. So it's not going to be easy, but I think we both feel pretty good about where Rice is at. And then, we'll take a week off, go hit the beach, take a rest, and then go for a very interesting final 7 game slate, as Rice is still in contention for their bowl hopes and aspirations that they've been talking about for some time now. So I'm feeling good. You're feeling good. We'll watch. Ooh, is this the owl cam? I feel like an owl perched up on the side watching you in the box. Does it have a name?
Are we talking about my screen, or what's the?
Yeah, when we get to watch you call the game.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, duh. Okay, wait, what are we talking about? Yeah, we have the new camera. I hold no expense. I went out and bought a new camera. We've got the In the Booth feed, Rice House Facebook, YouTube pages, and you can catch us on the Varsity Network app, the Rice House Game Day app as well.
Yeah, it's fun. I put it on every game. I just like listening to you talk. I mean, I guess that's why we're doing this, right? It's purely for my entertainment purposes.
Why, thank you.
Maybe not. We'll see. But yeah, JP will be there this weekend. I'll be there this weekend. We got football to talk about. If you're not subscribed on Patreon, I'll go ahead and plug that now. Patreon.com/@the-roost. We got practice notes. Rice has got not makeshift. That's not the right word, but they're doing what they can along the offensive line. We'll have notes there. We got running game stuff to talk about. I have a couple coaches I've chatted with this weekend about what the game plan is going to look like for UAB. Lots there. More to talk about. Big game coming up ahead. But for now, that's it for us. We will say goodbye. Bid you adieu. Tutu for now. Ta-ta. We'll see. I'll stick to English for now. But we're out. We will see y'all next week talking about, well, not next week. We'll be off next week. But we'll be back in a little bit talking about FAU. So thanks for tuning in. Rice Fight
Never dies.